This note is just so you can go look this up if you want to. These are not my own slides. They come from a fellow named Dr. Kevin Padian, and this is testimony from a case that we're going to look at later in the course, Kitzmiller versus Dober, happened back in 2005, but more about that anon. Okay, so these transitional forms are arranged in the temporal sequence that they appear in the fossil record. Okay, so it's suggestive. It's not knockdown, drag-out proof, but it's suggestive. The issue is also, just remember that we're not proposing direct descent at this point. We're not saying that Eusthenopteron is the direct ancestor of Pandorictus, and Pandorictus isn't the direct ancestor of Acanthostega. You're looking at what types of organisms are present in a certain geological time. Now, it might well be that there is a direct ancestry, but we're not able to resolve that level of resolution. Okay? So, these results immediately suggest further work. Any good theory is able to spin off more and more hypotheses as new data is generated. So, it drives scientists to say, okay, let's fill in the gaps. Let's see what's in between these things, because seamless common descent is predicted. If you can prove absolutely that there's a break and a gap, then you'd have to reorganize your thinking. Okay? Not so long ago, there was another gap that was filled, and specifically the gap of interest was right in between here, between Pandorictus and Acanthostega. This is a true amphibian. This appears to be a true lobe-finned fish. So the key interest was the transition. Presumably, if these are related through common descent, then there should be transitional forms in here that have quite interesting features. So some researchers went looking. Okay? They proposed this hypothesis. Amphibians are descended from Pandorictus through a series of transitional forms. The prediction would be that a form intermediate between Pandorictus and Acanthostega existed approximately 375 million years ago, which is this time in between these species in the fossil record. And the test of that is to simply go to fossil strata known to date to that time and see what you can find. So through a lot of hard work, this critter was found, and it's Canadian. It's great. This is Tiktaalik rosé. It was found in the Canadian Arctic in 2004. They found 3 skeletons that season, and they've since found about 9 more. And here's a look at what it looks like. Now, this is an artist recreation. Full disclosure, we don't really know what the tail looks like. This is based on Acanthostega, because we haven't yet found a skeleton that has this part of the body. But we do have a number of good skeletons that represent this part of the animal. And what you can see is lobe-finned, has the appearance of being a lobe-finned fish, but also has a head that is not very fish-like. And it seems to be intermediate between Pandorictus and Acanthostega. It's at the right time, in rocks of the right age, and it has the features that you would have predicted as an intermediate form. So again, not knockdown, drag-out proof, but we're still on that loop of prediction, same hypothesis, prediction, test, not yet rejecting. Okay? I think it's cute. I think if I could get a plushie of that for my kids, I think that'd be fun. There's a nice website from the people who discovered it, and you can go to the link there and look at some pictures. It's quite nice. We'll also see one of the things that you're assigned to watch later on in the course has a little segment on Tiktaalik as well. Okay? Alrighty. So, another point on the graph, Tiktaalik adds further support to the hypothesis that amphibians, or tetrapods, and fish share a common ancestor. Okay. Not knockdown, drag-out proof, but supportive, suggestive evidence. Okay, moving on. You'll notice that all modern amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, of which we are a part, are predicted to arise through this lineage. So the question then becomes, okay, what about this side of the equation, this branch of the proposed tree? So evolution as a theory continues to generate new hypotheses. What we're going to look at now is a somewhat counterintuitive example. We're going to look at modern whales. Whales are mammals. like we are. The interesting thing is, if we predict that all mammals are descended ancestrally from amphibians, which is what the prediction that evolutionary theory makes at this point, then we are forced to make the counterintuitive prediction that whales, which are sea-dwelling mammals, are descended from terrestrial vertebrates. And that's a counterintuitive prediction. The reason being is that whales are mammals, and there's no evidence or there's no hypothesis put forward that mammals arose separately. Once you're a mammal, then you're a mammal. And the issue then is, okay, we've got mammals that live in aquatic environments, but they are proposed to have been descended from terrestrial animals. So the hypothesis is modern cetaceans, or whales, dolphins, porpoises, and such, are descended from ancestral terrestrial organisms through a series of transitional forms. Now we're going to do something a little different. We're going to step out from the fossil record and start talking about living organisms. Let's talk about a different line of evidence. Okay, we have modern whales. We can look at their DNA. Is there any evidence that the genomes in these organisms was once adapted to a terrestrial environment? Do they have any genes in them for terrestrial stuff that we would expect them to have because they are ancestrally related to terrestrial organisms? So how do you test this? Well, we now have DNA sequencing available. We can look for remnants of genes in modern whales that were once involved in terrestrial life. So the details get a little bit beyond your abilities in this course, but the point to make is modern whales have the remnants of genes for a couple of things. One is they have the remnants of genes for short wavelength sensitive cells in the eye, so basically photosensitive molecules that transduce short wavelength light. We'll talk about this more when we talk about sensory systems later on in the course. Land-dwelling mammals have that, we have that, and it's functional. Whales appear to have had it at one point, even though primarily their vision is now underwater, where this type of gene doesn't make any sense. Same deal for the genes responsible for the sense of smell, so olfaction. Whales have a large number of genes that are dedicated to air-based olfaction, smelling, in an air-based environment. That doesn't make a lot of sense if you're an aquatic organism. The other interesting thing is some types of whales, toothed whales, for example, have no olfactory organ anymore. Their blowhole is a straight shot down to their lungs without any physiological part devoted to smelling. Yet they have the genes, the remnants of genes in their genomes that are dedicated to air-based olfaction, which is kind of an interesting thing. Counterintuitive. Evolutionary theory forces you into those types of predictions, uncomfortable though they might be, yet they still seem to be supported by the experimental evidence. Okay, so that's one line of evidence for whale common descent from terrestrial vertebrates. Okay, so another line of evidence. So again, the same hypothesis, modern whales, porpoises, etc., are descended from ancestral terrestrial organisms. One prediction that you might make is to say, okay, modern whales don't look a lot like terrestrial mammals. Terrestrial mammals typically have 4 limbs. Whales don't. They have 2 flippers and a tail. They don't have hind limbs like other vertebrate mammals do. Mammals do, sorry. So the question then becomes, okay, well, you're forced into this uncomfortable prediction that whales at one time had 4 limbs. And are there any ways to test that hypothesis? Well, one thing that has been known for quite a while is that whale and dolphin embryos, at a certain point in their development, actually do have 4 limbs. They just lose them later on in development. So here is a early dolphin embryo. And you can see, in terms of, as an embryologist of a sort, I can tell you that mammalian embryos tend to look very, very similar to one another at various stages during development. It's actually somewhat challenging to pick them apart unless you're a specialist. Later on, they become